Coming out today for this capital improvements project workshop of Tuesday, August 26, 2025. Real quick, if you have not signed up to speak, please go ahead and fill out a form and get that turned in. And is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Adoption is approved. So workshop discussion, I'd like for today really to be just that, a discussion, so that we can talk about not only what we've got on the table in front of us, but maybe some other things as well, because this will help plan out the future. And as we start talking about funding in a little bit as well, it'll help with that conversation. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, I'm going to let Sean Leininger get started, and I'm going to jump in as we go. But thanks for having us today. I know we're going to dive into our CIP program. We're going to hit on a few things. First and foremost, real quick, we're going to remind us that we're in year 1 of year 5 in the capital program. We're going to talk a little bit about those 5-year priorities and then talk about some funding strategies. I have some questions for you along the way, but I'm not going to dive into those just yet. Turn over to Sean.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, Mayor Perry, members of Town Council. This afternoon, we are going to focus in on our capital improvement program. Specifically, we're going to focus on all those program areas except for stormwater program. Reason for that is we have a specific workshop dedicated just to stormwater next month, September 30th, I believe is the date. We'll dive into that in great detail. You'll see some little nuggets related to the stormwater program through this presentation, but just know that we're not ignoring it. We'll talk about it next month. Bulk of our time, we want to talk about the FY 27 through 2030 capital improvement projects. You recall we showed those as part of the FY 26 budget that was adopted by Town Council, but a lot of our focus, rightfully so, because we were talking about the FY 26 budget, was about those projects that would happen this year. So we'll spend the bulk of our time talking about those projects and then specifically having a conversation with Town Council about funding options to support those projects should they come forward in future years. We'll start with a quick overview of the strategic action plan. Make sure that we're all staying rooted in that plan that Town Council just adopted for 26 through 2028. But then a high level current status update of where we are with 26 projects before we get into the details of those out years. So let's start with our strategic action plan. As you recall, there's 10 goals set out in that strategic action plan. And I'm not going to go through each goal individually, on each action item individually, but know that our capital improvement program is deeply rooted in many of those goals, those 10 goals that are in the strategic action plan. It includes investment in stormwater management infrastructure, enhancing our major corridors and streets, enhancing public safety readiness and facilities, reinforcing island resilience, protecting and enhancing environmental sustainability, and then last but not least is enhancing community well-being through the implementation of the Parks and Rec Master Plan and program enhancements. As we go through all of these projects, there are a lot of projects in our 5-year scope or a 5-year plan. You can point every one of those projects back to an item that's in the strategic action plan. So let's spend a few moments talking about the FY 26 projects and where we are. Just a quick refresher about the 26 budget and the proposed use of funds. If you recall, the CIP is broken into a number of different program areas: beach, pathways, roadways, parks, facilities and equipment, stormwater, fleet, land acquisition, administration. Of that, it represents a $78 million budget, about a $78 million budget for this fiscal year. A bulk of which those projects are, of course, in the beach program fund. $47.5 million is just going directly to the beach renourishment project. When we look at the overall program graphically then, in a pie chart, as you might expect, beach renourishment occupies a big part of that pie chart, with then our park program and roadway program and stormwater program picking up the major funding expenditures in FY 26. We have a variety of sources of funds that we utilize to program our CIP this year, because beach renourishment is such a big part of what we're doing. More than half of the funding is coming from our beach preservation fees, followed then by H-tax, stormwater utility fees, and then a sprinkling of a host of other sources that we have available to us to pay for capital improvement projects. I shared this in a little bit of detail during the FY26 budget workshop presentation. At that time, we were working on an update to the CIP dashboard. That dashboard is now live. You can look at all 78 projects that are in the program for this year, based on the different types of projects they are, those program areas I just talked about. You'll see a listing if you select this as beaches selected, so you can see the 5 beach projects. You can see where they are on a map. You can learn more about them. You can start to see if there's money being spent. And other details, if you were able to scroll down on this, you can see other details related to that specific action item. So know that this is out there. Please check it out. That's the web link to our CIP page. There's a big box in the left-hand corner that'll take you right to this dashboard, so you can dive in and learn more about each one of these projects. As far as the current status and where we are, as I mentioned, there's 78 projects in the 2026 queue. Those 78 projects, we can look at the different phases that they're in, whether in planning phase, design, which also includes permitting, or construction phase. Because we're new in the year, we have a number of projects that are progressing through design, will eventually get into construction. Also note that although there's 78 projects in this year's program, it doesn't mean 78 projects are going to be planned, designed, and built. About half of those will end up into construction of some type, whether it's completed or started this year. But a number of them will move from planning, they'll move into design, and then construction will happen potentially or will happen in future years, 27, 28, depending on which project we're talking about. 3 projects are currently underway. We have Mitchellville Road and Clickney Pocket Park are queued up. They've been bid. We are working on executing contracts to get those moving here forward very soon. And then we have a host of other projects getting queued up for construction, such as Taylor Family Park, Patterson Family Park, and a number of other stormwater and other projects. As we look at the 26 program and what our opportunities and challenges are we have as we start to deliver projects. Easement and right-of-way acquisition, there are a number of projects where we need to have easements or rights-of-way to do that, especially our dirt road paving program. The Jonesville pathway requires a number of easements. The Stormwater Division has a number of places where they need to have easements. Typically, as we go into an easement or right-of-way acquisition standpoint, generally the town has gone and asked for donations of right-of-way, donations of easements. While we've been generally successful in doing that, it also can elongate processes, and sometimes we don't necessarily agree, or residents may want something from the town more than just a donation. So some of the things that we need to think about as we move forward with some of our projects is there's really 3 ways that you can acquire an easement or a right-of-way. One is to have it donated to us. The other is to pay for it. And then the third is a process the town has not historically used. I'm not recommending that we use that, but the other is to condemn the easement for a public purpose. But as we look at our projects, we do need to have some conversations about budgeting for easement and right-of-way acquisition so that we can come in with something to offer to a resident rather than just the improvement itself. We're also seeing contractor availability capacity as an issue. We're at the end of the cul-de-sac being on a barrier island. Sometimes that can be a little bit harder for us to attract labor to the island. That it can also impact bid competition where we see less bidders and less competition in their bid prices. And then we're also seeing as great of a job as our CIP management team, project management team does in trying to get us real world pricing, we are seeing some projects come back above what our estimates are because of some of those other factors. And the last thing, just to end on a positive note, we do have some opportunities though that we see in our procurement process to get better about how we are asking people to engage with us and do business with us. We had a conversation about that as recently as yesterday. And our procurement team is working hard to find ways for us to be better business partners with the contractor community as we move forward with projects. This is a new map that you have not seen before as part of the FY26 budget presentation. This takes not all 78 projects, and all 78 projects can be mapped. For example, I don't know how to map where we're going to buy a truck, but anything that's a physical construction project is mapped on here from an FY26 standpoint. And it follows those same phases I referenced previously: planning, design, construction with different colored dots. As we work our way around the island, you can see our projects are spread around the entirety of the island, whether that be for any of the project areas, pathways, beaches, parks, stormwater, roadways, pathways. Just some quick highlights, just to refresh projects that we're working on. Of course, the beach renourishment, Caligny Circle Pocket Park. A lot of work right now going on in Crossings Park with design for the pickleball to get that under construction. Perhaps later FY26, but most likely early first part of FY27. Bristol Sports Arena will be right behind there. We have a number of dirt road paving programs, or roads identified, along with Jonesville Horsebound, Jonesville Road Pathway. And just some other projects with pathways and roadways, stormwater improvements as we work our way around the island. We talked a lot about this a couple months ago. I don't want to spend too much time. Certainly we can answer questions you have on specific projects, but this is just a good refresher where we are. Projects are underway, and we're advancing them as quickly as possible. So we want to spend, as I mentioned before, bulk of our time is on those 27 through 30 projects. Those next 4 years is we're actually already starting to get prepared for the FY27 budget and thinking through that. When we look at those out years, and we'll look at those budget sheets here in just a slide or two, but there are major investments that spread across all those program areas that I referenced, from beaches all the way down through land acquisition. For these out years, our project scope and costs, we don't fully realize those yet. We owe that to council to provide those. If you recall, this was really generation version 1 of a 5-year CIP that we provided with this budget cycle. And the next budget cycle, we're gonna detail out those scopes and provide some pricing to the extent that we can for those out year projects, so everybody has a good handle on what we're talking about. But we do have a great CIP team and project management team. At any given time, there's 8 project managers. Sometimes we pull in some other folks to help manage projects when needed. And also a good takeaway is that we are in great financial position to execute a lot of these projects. As town council considers, and I apologize, I'll type on it, I should say town council considers for project delivery include, we need to think about prioritization, we need to think about scope, we need to think about schedule, phasing, and cash versus debt. And that's gonna be the second part of our conversation today, is cash versus debt, when we look at our out year CIP. Those challenges and opportunities that I mentioned for FY26, we expect those to continue as we move forward. I'll give an example of something that we just heard from a contractor very recently as a result of SCDOT executing an $825 million project to widen I-95. Contractors are already knocking on our door and saying, when that project goes live and they start pouring asphalt and concrete, that will put a strain on the ability for us to get asphalt and concrete, as well as raise our prices. So those are some things that we have to pay attention to and be aware of in the region that we're in, and they will impact our projects. So hopefully these budget sheets look familiar. These were in your FY26 budget. At that time, what we really focused in on was this green column, which is the amount that was allocated for FY26. But what this does is it's broken out by program area. So this is the beach program, the project, whether or not it's a maintenance project or a discretionary project. In the case of FY26, how much money did we allocate towards it? In those out years, then is it a priority? We can ignore planning commission priority for right now, but just as a good refresher for where we expect the current status of those projects to end up that I shared earlier, we can see this is where we expect to be at the end of FY26 with these projects. Will they be in design? Will they be in permitting? Or will they be in design, permitting, or construction? On each of these projects, when you see priorities continue across multiple years, in most cases, that's going to be things that we just do every year. Maintenance of our beach parks, maintenance of our parks, of our roadways, of our pathways, et cetera. There's gonna be some other projects though, as we get specific projects when you get down, where there's just gonna be they're gonna take multiple years. We talked about this during the budget workshop. When we say go on a project, and we have to master plan it, we have to design it, we have to permit it, it can take a couple, 3 years for us just to get to construction with all those steps in place. So that's why you see a lot of these with a multi-year priority. When we think about the beach program itself, 2 specific projects just to call your attention to, well, 3 really. Islanders Beach Park, if you recall, there's another phase of that project that, with the beach renourishment project, we hit pause on that to get across the finish line, the beach renourishment project. We have some additional improvements that we need to go back and finish up out at Folly Field, where we invested in boardwalks, we invested in the resting facility, but we still need to invest in parking lot, landscaping, and better signage out there. And then Clugny Beach Boardwalk maintenance. That boardwalk is nearing the end of its life, and so we need to go through and make some improvements to that boardwalk. And that is a long-term project. We'll work on it over a number of years. We may get it done sooner than by 2030, but we're planning on that for a number of years. Yep. And just the construction columns, when we talk about FY26, you'll see for those projects where there is money allocated, then again, this is not the current status, where we expect to be at the end of 26 and we move into 27, which projects will be under construction this year, which projects will be in permitting, and which projects will be in design. There's about, if I added up correctly before we walked in here, there's about 43 projects that will be under construction or done with construction this fiscal year. Next is our pathway program. Again, just some things that things that we need to do every year. But then we have a host of new pathway segments that have been identified through a variety of sources that we've been carrying as priorities. South Forest Beach Hawk Signal at Marriott Grand. Along Lagoon Road, providing a pathway that connects Avocet over to North Forest Beach, something we've heard about quite a bit from the residents in that community. And building off of William Hilton Parkway Segment 3 and the improvements that were recently completed there, as well as some improvements we have planned out at Tabby Walk, which is at the other end of Palmetto Parkway, extending a pathway from Matthews Drive over to William Hilton. Spanish Wells Pedestrian Bridge. This is the wood bridge that goes along Spanish Wells, just in need of some replacement. On projects like this, you'll see us call these out rather than just be a pathway maintenance and improvement item, because of they're a significant project in and of themselves, and it's worthy of us to call those out because they're going to require a little bit higher funding allocation, a little bit higher commitment from town staff to execute those projects. Fish Hall Road includes extending the pathway that is currently along Fish Hall, continuing it to Bagall and Alice Perry Drive as phase 1. That's a multi-year project beginning in 2028. And then some other projects showing William Hilton Parkway eastbound, really through that segment 5. And this may, since we're advancing segment 5 this year, this may be one that ultimately gets combined into segment 5 and doesn't show as a standalone project. But we have it identified here just to make sure we're capturing it as a priority. Thinking about Cross Island Parkway and how we connect Spanish Wells and the Coastal Discovery Museum. Right now, the Coastal Discovery Museum is kind of on an island of itself where there's not pedestrian connectivity to that area from the Spanish Wells neighborhood. And then something we talked about with the Muddy Creek Neighborhood Stabilization Plan, the Bryant Road project, is how do we connect that neighborhood to the existing trail system that sits just a couple hundred feet away along the Cross Island Parkway. Our roadway program, again, carries a number of things that are maintenance related: roadway maintenance, town road resurfacing. So think of roadway maintenance versus resurfacing. Resurfacing is that. It's resurfacing the roadway, whereas maintenance is spot repairs, could be striping, could be some other improvements that go there, signage. Followed by signal system maintenance, our adaptive signal, making sure that that's operating as best as it can each year, and the landscape lighting improvements. Right now, we're working on 5 dirt road paving projects. Mitchellville Road is ready to go to construction. And then at various stages with easement acquisition, right-of-way acquisition with Alice Perry Drive, Freddie's Way, Alfred Lane, and Benjamin Drive. You can see as those projects start to move from this phase into construction, then we have a whole host of other ones that we like to pick up, and that next phase of dirt road paving projects that we have identified with those listed here on the screen. Again, the dirt road paving projects do take a considerable amount of time. primarily related to the right-of-way acquisition, working with the neighborhood, working with them to understand and have buy-in on the project, and then following through and making sure that those right-of-ways are in place as we start to finalize plans and begin construction. A couple of other projects that will continue beyond FY26, the island-wide intersection pedestrian vehicular safety improvements. We already started looking at Squire Pope, Gumtree. I think the other one was Matthews Drive, Jeff, if I have that right, is Beach City. But continuing that look around the island, making pedestrian safety or vehicular safety improvements around the island year after year. Jonesville Road and the Spanish Wells right turn lane improvements, which really we have that combined right now with the Jonesville pathway, which we'll see on a later, we're in the pathway. We'll see that on the pathway slides as well. North Point access improvements, with North Point coming online at the end of FY26. That's a project we'll see come active in FY27. I mentioned the Palmetto Parkway pathway. Part of that is also to relocate the entrance for Tabby Walk off of Matthews Drive over onto Palmetto Parkway, create a much safer access for them, for users of Matthews Drive, as well as the pedestrians that come in and out of that community. And then a project that Sean Collins leaving behind here soon is the working through the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor and Stony Corridor study and master plan. Looking at these out years, there are a number of large projects coming out of the thoroughfares and corridors plan. So we'll see those broken out in two segments. One is the streetscape enhancements from Main Street, New Orleans, Air Road, others that are listed here on the screen. We have those just scheduled out right now, pending adoption of the major thoroughfares and corridors plan. Looking at the out years to pick those up, but that'll be something that we'll need to prioritize better as we advance the major thoroughfares and corridors plan. Same thing with William Hilton Parkway and the streetscape enhancements. So those 8 segments that are in the major thoroughfares plan, looking at each one of those. We do have some work planned currently this fiscal year to advance segment 5. So that segment from Matthews Valley Road over to Shelter Cove, the area that doesn't have a median right now. Starting to think through survey work and starting community conversations to think about what we can accomplish in better access, beautification, median, and pathway connections in that corridor. And then segment 8, we also have some money allocated where we're working right now with the C-Pine CSA. We're working with SCDOT to help us analyze the work that we've already done at C-Pine Circle. And DOT is analyzing that to help make sure we've identified the solutions that are available and give us their thoughts and recommendations on it as it is their circle and it is their intersection. They're doing that right now. We expect to have some feedback here in the next several weeks from DOT. And then just kind of closing out this category, there's a number of improvements that relate to Wilburn, Rome, Pembroke. Folly Field pedestrian improvements is something we're working on this year, but we'll probably continue in the next year to get the improvements actually built. And so that's the balance of our roadway program. Again, parks have maintenance and improvements. We have a public art program that we continue on each year. Island Rec, you'll see this also with the Coastal Discovery Museum. Island Rec and the Coastal Discovery Museum also provide us a 5-year CIP to help us understand what they have allocated or what they're thinking about in the next several years. Although there's not numbers up here on the screen, when we look in the out years of Island Rec, they have some significant improvements that they need to start thinking about with HVAC replacements. That'll be something will be request higher than the typical $500,000 or so that's been requested each year for a number of years now. So we expect to see a higher request coming from them starting in 27, but really in 28 and 29 as those major improvements start to come to. And as the town owns the Island Rec building, and the Island Rec operates the building. Thinking then about park projects, we've been doing a lot of work on Chaplin with expansion of parking, renovation of parking, thinking about soccer complex facility upgrades. A lot of that work that we've hit pause on that to keep crossings moving ahead and really just better sequence those projects. But we have a lot of work to pick up beginning in FY27, where we left off with Chapel and advancing those projects from design into construction in 28 and 29. You see Crossings Park, I mentioned briefly, we're working on that already. A major project coming that we're in design right now that'll depend on permitting will likely hit construction in FY27 will be the Mid-Island Track Phase 1. So that Phase 1 is taking that eastern side of the tract, opening up that stream, creating a wetland system, a stormwater system, providing better connectivity through the site with pathways, with restrooms, providing parking to the site, and really starting to now activate that as Phase 1 as a public park, and also setting it up for future improvements with St. James Baptist Church and other things identified in our master plan. Some other priorities that are in the out years: Chapel and Linear Park, including the treehouse, that connection from Shelter Cove over to Chaplain Park itself, old schoolhouse park, with a lot of improvements that we're carrying on right now. And then looking in the out years, looking at Barker Field, Mitchellville property, that property we just acquired, and things that we could do there. The facilities program is really a lot of maintenance items related to the assets that we own. There's a couple of items though that are worth calling out in here, or important to call out in here, because they will have impacts on how we move forward with a couple of key initiatives related to Town Hall and Fire Rescue Headquarters. So the third item we have here is Town Hall facility improvements, and you'll see that that's an ongoing item. As you've been through our building recently, you've probably have come in at some point and had smelled a strange smell in our room, different rooms, different areas of Town Hall. You've seen water damage, you've seen carpet damage. You can see it right outside these doors right here. Over the last, I've been here a little over a year, and over the last year that I've been here, maybe it's me, we've had 6 or 7 leaks of our sprinkler system that have, unfortunately, when those happen, it is rusty pressurized water that also has antifreeze in it because it sits in our attic spaces, and we have to keep it from freezing. But when we have those leaks, it causes a tremendous amount of damage. And it also causes an unfortunate odor through our town hall, where we have to now move staff out of their offices and go work remote. It does create it creates a challenging work situation for us, or a challenging work situation for our visitors, for our guests, when we have meetings like this here in town hall. We are working to get estimates on that. The system is 40 years old. It needs to be replaced. Those estimates are coming in, pushing $1 million. We also have a whole host of other improvements. I shouldn't even say improvements, they're repairs to this building. They're not just fixing what's broken here. We have structural issues with floors in building A, which is over here to my left, building C, which is over here to my right. We have carpet replacement. We have roofs and HVACs that need to be replaced. Where we are starting to now itemize just things that we need to fix in this building are starting to approach $2 million. And that's in addition to the million or so dollars that we've invested in the building, just again on repairs in the last 5 years. So we really need to have a conversation as we move forward with this building about what do we do with this building? Do we continue to invest in it that way? Or do we start to think about taking what was really a modular building, it's getting towards the end of its useful life? Do we talk about perhaps tearing down sections of this building and building back with something that's new, that's modern, that's permanent, and addresses all these issues that we're working with? So that's an important project for FY as we look at these future years of our CIP. You'll also see we'll have the fire rescue will have a significant ask next year to replace the air breathing apparatus equipment that all the firefighters use. That is a significant request. It's generally around $1 million, $1.5 million, if I have that right, Chief. So you'll start to see that to be asked next year. You'll see Coastal Discovery Museum. Again, this is a property that we own. These are assets that we own that are managed by a third party. You'll see some of the improvements that they have planned out there. As Rex and his team are working to make improvements, they are working on updating the master plan for that property and trying to take that, some of the improvements out there to the next level and let it be even more of an asset than it already is. But the other project I want to highlight is the fire rescue headquarters. Right now, of course, everybody knows our fire rescue headquarters is over by the airport, by our facilities department. It is basically a metal building that's been there for many years. It is also tired. When I first got here, unfortunately, we're dealing with Tropical Storm Debbie. Had an opportunity to walk through that building as we were receiving rain, and there was water coming through the roofs and coming through the floors from areas just outside of there. And that's where our fire safety forces headquarters are. They have modern facilities for all of our stations. One of the things we really need to focus on how do we have a modern facility for our fire rescue department, but also then consolidate our dispatch center, consolidate our emergency operations center, which is now in third-party lease space that we don't own or control. And there's a host of other improvements on here. I think a lot of these we've talked about in the past with Mitchellville Freedom Park. Some equipment purchases that are a little bit more minor in nature in terms of the overall CIP. Stormwater, I'm going to skip this. We'll talk about this next month with Jeff and his team. A lot of projects on this list that we can take a closer look at. Some pretty significant projects on this list too as we think about our stormwater system on the island. On the last couple of slides that I have are related to the fleet program. Not really any major items of note here, other than the medic units out in 2029. I believe there's 10 medic units that will need to be re-chassied. There will be a significant request to re-chassis those 10 medic units. And the last one we have is a land acquisition program, which is really just the administration side. We, of course, work with town council. And town council authorizes individual acquisitions, and then we amend the budget. This is just those soft costs that are associated with appraisals, legal work, et cetera, for this program. So that's what comprises our FY26 program. Also what comprises that 27 through 30, at least how we've reviewed it to this point. Hopefully that gives you everybody a clear understanding of where we're headed with this program. It'll continue to be refined each year, especially those out years. As we add projects, as projects fall off. And from there, I'm going to hand it over to the finance team.
Yeah, and me real quick, because the one thing I want to just slow down and pause and want to ask if you have any questions so far, because I want to really wrap our minds around today what you need from us, what we need from you. I think that's the biggest question in the room today. Why are we having this workshop? What do you all need from us? I will say one of the takeaways is that I ask is that just the knowledge that the program is advancing. I don't want to say finally, but I believe it is advancing better than it's ever advanced in my 4.5 years here. And I'd say mainly because we're clear on what our priorities are. We've learned a little bit about how to design, bid, price, construct on Hilton Head Island, and Richard Loudon is in the room. He's heading up the CIP program, and he works very closely. Where is he? Jeff Netzinger? Where is he? Oh, there you are. You blended in over there. The town council has also approved many master plans. Pick one, right? We know what we should do at Old Schoolhouse as much as we know what we should do at Crossings, at Chaplin, wherever. So you have Patterson, Taylor, those are fully cash funded and ready to go by the end of the year. So we really are clear from you what your design aesthetic is, what your clarity on those 1 year priorities are. But as we start getting into what we look at as year 2, 3, 4, 5 and beyond in a CIP program, the good news here is we're starting to wonder what you want. So I have a few questions that I want you to be thinking about as John Troyer. Mr. Troyer, welcome back. Thank goodness you're here. But just as John starts talking, John's our interim finance director, but which projects are the highest priorities over the 5 years? So as you just saw those projects, I'm sure you have all, like we do, I think Sean's favorite project's Town Hall. I just want to say that, apparently. But which projects are the highest priorities to you over the 5 years? Quality of life focus in the neighborhoods, parks, roads, stormwater, right? And then confirm we're heading in the right direction. So I think that's what that 5 years should do. And every time we come back to the budget discussions and considerations, we'll continue to refine that. I think another big question as Mr. Troyer talks today is, what is town council's comfort level? Cash, pay as you go, or is there a comfort level with some bond capacity? Do we maximize now, or do we reduce that millage when the time comes in that fund reserve? And so I think just in our own minds right now, just start to assess that assessment of cash funded, right? What that cash funded plan is and isn't, from an expectation standpoint, and then also what a cash debt funded plan looks like. And so, are there any projects up on that screen we should accelerate? We've talked, together and collectively about our fire rescue headquarters and some opportunity there. I have started to talk to you a little bit when the sprinkler systems keep exploding, and is it Freon that's in them, Jeff? Antifreeze. Sorry, wrong word. Antifreeze that's in them, and the smell and the toxicity of that, we're still figuring out. But just in terms of, are there projects to accelerate due to urgency, opportunity, community value? And as we look at this, we are going to give you some options to look at things 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 20 years out. We've paid a lot of debt off over time. I am not sitting here today to say, hey, we paid all this debt off. Let's go borrow the same and get back in debt. I just really want to be realistic about our capacity and our debt millage, right? We know what that is. There's some cash value in there. We have 2 mills, still a little thunder, but 2 mills in our debt fund, in our millage capacity. We know that we're going to talk to you soon about the beach preservation bond that's ready to schedule and bring to council. We know that we're going to talk about stormwater utility program next month, and a little bit today on tax increment financing district. I will say that as we looked at it in Sean's eyes and our eyes, we're pretty confident that our projects are aligned with our strategic plan. We're confident of how long it's taking us to build a project, and we're confident about year 1. We're trying to find some confidence of year 2 through 5 today, but not also walk in the room with 12 projects to tell you we want to borrow for. We don't know that yet until we hear from you.
I'd like to bring up another little bit of a discussion with this as well, and that is, are we behind, right, in terms of looking at our CIP in maintenance on some of the structures that we have? Are we coming in too hungry at the moment, with capacity of the workforce that's out there to do stuff? How do we have that conversation as well, so that we get the right things done? Yes, sir. Mr. Troyer.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm sorry. I thought you looked to me to have him start.
No, Ms. Donner.
I just have a question based on some of the things that you said in your presentation. So one of the items is we only have costing for the current fiscal year. So 2 questions. If a project has construction checked on it, is the amount listed in this deck the final cost of construction?
Yes, if it's an FY26 construction project, it includes the construction cost.
Or at least that phase. Use Mid-Island, but just if Mid-Island was there, it wouldn't be for the full project, but the phase that we've agreed to in scope and schedule, yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, you mentioned that as a to-do, you're going to be gathering costs as best you can for all of those other projects that do not have costs. When can we anticipate that? Because that's going to be very important as we think about future pacing, whether we can live within our means, whether there needs to be money that's borrowed, et cetera. And without that information, you really can't make a decision.
So we would present that as part of the 27 budget is what we would start working through right now to program out the 27 CIP list and include project estimates, project costs, actual costs for 27, or I'm sorry, estimates for 27 and do that for 28, 29, 30. And then we'd add 31 as part of that budget presentation is when we would see that.
So we have to wait until next year's budget.
If we walk out of the room today, and that's why I asked the question, are there, yes, unless you want to accelerate some things walking out of the room today. Now, we start next year's budget in January. We're not going to show up in June and tell you what those price points are. But there's a lot of projects on there. I will tell you, we have much more appetite for project than we have cash value in our reserves. We know that. So we are starting to price those projects out while we're building our current projects. So I think today, talk about if there's any projects that are priorities, because we are pricing, like town hall, like I can price a $10 million town hall, I can price a $2 million fix. We can price fire rescue, $2 million enhancement, or we can price a new fire rescue headquarters. We're trying to look at the prioritization of the community investment, not just how much it costs. There's a little bit of balance there. And frankly, we just haven't talked about this out loud. And I think this is the first step towards that.
I just want to add to Ms. Turner's line of thinking. When we decided to go to a 5-year CIP program, and not necessarily include potential out-of-year cost in our current fiscal, I sort of figured we were going to run into this. So I'm just suggesting and challenging us that we look at our 5-year CIP program outside of fiscal. Because to Ms. Turner's point, if we're going to be talking 3, 4, 5 years out, we have to have some idea as to what that number looks like, okay? And obviously there's gonna be inflation, there's gonna be an add-on because Hilton Head's dollar is stronger than Bluffton's dollar, whatever the case may be. But I feel like the CIP conversation is setting apart from fiscal. I just wanted to offer that.
Understand. And we can do that. I mean, we can put prices on here right now by the time we get to the project. It's like Islanders. What did Islanders come in at? $1 million over expected, and we have a tough decision. Do we reduce the scope that you asked us to accomplish, or come back to the drawing board with the money? So we've tried not to project too far out with that pricing, but I hear you. We are working on it. I think today's a big step to know what priorities are on your mind so that we hone in on those price points, because that's a lot of pricing on that sheet.
Following up on that, so as we look to this, I know we've got specific funding, for instance, beach renourishment. We can kind of discuss that, check that box and move on. But the other projects that we're looking at in these out years, so as I understand it, we are to discuss what our priorities might be. But then there's also how can we decide on the list of priorities if we don't have some grand estimate of what it might cost. So it seems as though, maybe we ought to pick our, 5 priorities. I'm just going to pick a number out there. I've admitted I like the number 5. I won't tell you why, but anyhow, or if there's a different number, and then maybe priority 1 or these 5, priority 2 or these 3, and then you can come back with some idea of, okay, well, if you want to do that, then our gross estimate is X amount of dollars, and then we can fine tune the priorities. I'm trying to think of a way we can approach it.
And just one more question, since, again, playing off what you said. When the actual costs or estimates end up being significantly more than you had budgeted for, what is your process? As you said, you can look for more money or you can adjust scope. How does that work? Being a new town council member, I'm not sure, do you come back to town council and ask for approval on that, or do you work that out through your budget? I just want to understand the process.
It depends on the magnitude of the project. Let's pick Patterson Park as an example. Patterson Park, as it was bid, came in higher than we first anticipated. However, we have, within park program, we have a little bit of funds from some other parks that we came in under on. I make that work. I'm going to deliver that project. We will report to you at the appropriate time at the finance committee. If something comes in so overpriced, two things happened. One, someone got a hold of our price and overbid, or however you want to look at it, or we made a mistake. We're going to come and talk to you about that and ask you to either A, reduce the scope, AKA your expectations, or B, we need some additional funding. And it's just, I think, case specific on the big projects. I'm with you on the little ones, and there's a small gap. We're going to make it work. And I have that ability, the way the budget is adopted.
I'm not opposed to borrowing. A number of reasons. One of them is a contingency for phase funding these projects. You know, for instance, a mile and a half of bike path. Phase one's 5,000 feet of bike path. For one, you got to find a good contractor. We got to find that person, and if that person turns out to be the contractor of choice, then there's no mobilization, demobilization. Again, if you can pull phase two into phase one, but the bidding process has to allow for that to happen up front. That way you get the economy of scale. You know, there's a big cost in mobilization on some of these projects. I would imagine, depending on the project, 20-25% sometimes of your projects, eaten up with mobilization. So we can eliminate that. And but we got to have the cash available to be able to pull that forward, and then have a special meeting to pull it forward if we need to. Mm-hmm. It's just it's a monetary decision, but we have to be ready and prepared to make that decision.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Great point. I look at what's kind of been outlined for fiscal year 26, and it covers a lot of the quality of life aspects. Obviously, we're going to have a infrastructure conversation about stormwater, but then we really need to ask ourselves, is pumping $1 million, $2 million, $3 million into an aged structure, which is almost at its end of life, if we say, yes, this building needs to be redone, we're still probably 2 years out from anything really getting done. And then we know that fire and rescue doesn't meet the quality as to what has been set forth by councils in the past and current. So I'm just kind of putting it out there that if we're going to look at two other items coming out of this, or any other items coming out of this for prioritization, I think those are two that we really need to consider and figure out how to move them forward. Mr. Orlando stated that one of the office spaces is leased. Those leaseholders, the owners of that building, come to us every year asking us if we're vacating yet. So they're pushing hard for us to get out, so that space will be gone eventually. Those are the things that we need to really consider in this discussion today. Not to say that we've got a final answer, but knowing how we're going to move forward with some of these other decisions.
Are you looking for us to react to that now, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Both ladies have their lights on, so I'll wait.
I just wanted to chime in on the original part of the conversation before it gets too far away. And I don't mind having that conversation, and I do understand that we have leased properties that we'd probably be better off if we were in our own space. But speaking of our own space, we own some assets that are underutilized right now, for instance, PNC or Wild Wings. And I just want to make sure that as we're talking about this, we're also talking about how we utilize those assets that we've purchased and yet have not identified a specific need for. So that's all.
Okay, Ms. Donner?
Yes, there is a category that is not included in the CIP plan, and that is our land management strategy. So We have access to money through the Beaufort County tax referendum, which the green space, which we've been leveraging and using. But we also use town funds, real estate transfer fee, and other monies to purchase properties as well. And if we think about our number one strategic plan, which is preserving and protecting our island and managing our growth, one of the best ways to manage your growth is to purchase the land and/or development rights to limit growth. And so that is a category that is not included in the CIP plan, but it is something that needs to be thought of in regards to funding for the future, potentially.
Mayor? Yeah. We go back to the 5-year CIP program, the land acquisition program is in there. I'm not challenging that. I'm just not sure what you're looking for.
That's the administrative cost. That's not the cost of the land or the purchase.
Understand that. We have traditionally used fund reserves, whether it's real estate transfer fee, we go to the green space, and then through budget amendment, we pull the money in there. I'm just curious what you're asking me for.
It's an acknowledgement that there is a demand for land purchases. And if that's something that we're going to continue to activate, that we need to understand where we're going to get those funds.
I understand that, what you're saying.
I was about to say it in Gullah for you, but I got it, where she's going. I think it's very similar to the point that Mr. Desimone was making of us having that cash on hand to be nimble when land acquisitions present themselves, right? So sure. I think if we're having a discussion about our bonding capacity, that needs to be a part of it as well, so that we are ready and willing to purchase if we need to, even if the real estate transfer fee number is not where the price of the land is, okay?
I understand.
So,
and that is in the next section.
Okay, all right, perfect. So to the mayor's point of these high ticket items that are not currently in the plan, the town hall and the fire and rescue headquarters. Number one, I'm supportive of us making that a new priority and try to get it done in quick order. First of all, I guess I'm troubled when we walk into this building and we come through the corridor and almost all of us say, "What's that smell?" But that's a few times a week. We got our staff here 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And if we're worried about floors falling in, that's a whole nother story. So to me, it's already a priority. I think we need to be challenging Mr. Orlando to come back to us with options and numbers that we can consider. It's yesterday's news for me, as far as I'm concerned. And when it comes to the fire and rescue headquarters, along with our dispatch, which also serves as our emergency operations center, I sort of joke with Chief Blankenship and the mayor and Mr. Orlando when I visited. That place looks like we are a limited service government. It really does. And it does not shine the light of excellence that we so proudly say out loud as one of our core values. So we're asking folks to put their lives on the line on a daily basis, and their leadership is not in a place of quality. And to me, that's unacceptable. So that too, if it's finding a building that makes sense for headquarters, or us looking for land to build on, I think you need to bring those options back to us so we can make some decisions on that as well. But those are my comments on those priorities, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Steve?
Out of turn or whatever, but for me personally, I think town hall's lived its life. And the inconvenience to staff of tearing down A or B or C building, and the time to put it back up would be extremely costly just to put the staff somewhere else. I've always thought that town hall's in the wrong place. I think it's a bad location. The entrance of Wexford, there's not enough parking here. There's many times that I would come to town hall prior to being on council, and I'd find myself in the grass trying to make a parking spot. And driving a truck, I did make a parking spot a few times. So I think we've looked at a couple locations that might serve us better, that we probably need to dive into deeper and see if there's an opportunity not only for that, but for the expansion, if needed, of that property. And it's obvious that there's an ability for an enormous amount of parking. I think we missed the ship. Prior councils missed that when they didn't pick up on its Port Royal Plaza. Would have been a great place, but we need to look into that. And trying to put lipstick on a pig sometimes is just that. It's lipstick on a pig, and it's a lot of waste of money, and you find yourself 8 or 9 years down the road having to do it again or tear it down. So.
Ms. Dunn?
As we identify potential other priorities that we want to pull forward, I feel strongly that we need to then remove priorities commensurate with what we're going to be adding. This shouldn't be you've already laid out your 78 projects, that we add these big projects on top of it. We need to pull back then. We do not have unlimited funds.
I agree with that, Ms. Tunner, and it sounds as though we've already identified 3 priorities. And on my list of 5, there are only 2 left. So the 3 priorities I think we've identified just by discussion are fire and rescue headquarters, and what to do about town hall, and I'll call it town hall disrepair. How's that? And then thirdly, the land acquisition. So if those are 3 of our top 5 priorities, then I'm with Ms. Tunner. We've got to decide what to take off the list, and especially because those are really big ticket items. A lot of the other items, we have maybe some design money, even thought about in FY 2027, but why bother with design if we're not going to end up having the money to do it? So I'm just throwing out those 3 areas for us to think about.
I would caution us to be careful in what we start talking about maybe taking off of a list, because we've gone through processes to tell the public this is what we're working on. So from a standpoint of capacity in dollars, I'm going to rely on the town staff to kind of help direct us on that. But I do want to ask council, just to, does everybody, we've identified a couple other areas of concern, the town hall, fire and rescue. At some point, when we start talking about stormwater management, we're going to talk about a public works department, right? All very important aspects to our community. But I want to rely on the financial advice and the planning advice from both sides of the table here to help us with that. I agree, we don't need to get ourselves into a position where we're borrowing too much money, utilizing too much of our reserves, but we also have to make certain we get it right.
Is there a timing aspect involved with this question? We have already spent a number of months determining what our priorities are, and we're looking at the current and the next fiscal year. And I wonder whether these larger projects for town hall, fire and rescue, and so on are not right for this year, but they're a couple of years down the road, and therefore should not impact what we have already decided to go forward with in the strategic action plan.
Yeah, I'll answer that. I think as all systems go with what we're saying we're doing in FY 26, that's why we went over that with you. I think any planning for, and when John gets through the next section, we're trying to tee up available funds. Because I agree, we're not, and I made sure I said that, we're not trying to borrow funds. I'm simply trying to ask you, do you want us to accelerate certain projects? And if we're going to build town hall and fire rescue, and if we're make those improvements, then yes, we're going to accelerate those projects. It's just a conversation today. I don't have full answers. You will see in the next section, though, that there is cash available in the debt millage reserve. We talked about that being for land acquisition. It's more than $13 million. Above and beyond our 10 or $11 million, what's in our real estate transfer fee right now, ish? So, and then the other question is, if we would borrow, would you pledge a certain percentage of that for land, facility, park? We talk next month about stormwater. I think our stormwater utility fee, as we really assess it and compress how we're using it, there is borrow capacity to accelerate some stormwater projects of concern, which include right-of-way and ditch and system channel acquisition. So I think as we get through the next section, it starts answering those questions. We are not simply today trying to change the direction of the airplane with FY26, but we're starting to plan for 27 right now and not knowing if it's cash or debt.
So in terms of priorities, fire and rescue is one of the most important safety features we have on the island. We also are looking forward to an assessment on what a public safety department or enhancement looks like, and those are additional costs. So in terms of priorities, those two reach the level of what a public government should be focused on. And so how we look at the needs for fire rescue, dispatch, et cetera, the space that they need, I would put that as along with the public safety department that we've been talking about. Secondly, our town staff needs to be in a healthy environment. And I'm not sure of what the square footage needs are and how any of our other assets would help, and whether or not there's an additional space around the assets that we currently own that we could acquire to put together a good town hall that's visible to the public and within keeping of our character. So those are two important things. I certainly think also, I don't want to miss the opportunity, limited service governments means simply that we do not overreach into everything and anything, that we stay within what is government is responsible for. And those are the things that I just spoken about. It has nothing to do with the quality of a building. Having said that, the other things that I certainly don't want to lose sight of, and I realize we're talking about this next month, but stormwater. As we've driven around and have experienced the last several weeks, month of rains, we can see that the overdevelopment, the lack of pervious ground that still exists, has now caused flooding on almost every piece of property around the island. It's not just in certain spots anymore. It is everywhere. There's standing water still today in places that I have never seen standing water before. And so stormwater has to be a priority. I am concerned. Two things. Ms. Tunner, I agree with you. Melinda, you're right. I heard you mention things that we wanted to accelerate, that we want to advance. I don't think that that's the place we should be thinking in light of the discussion about what we want to set as priorities. I think we ought to be looking at reductions, places that we haven't yet started, things that we don't necessarily have to rely on, and that we're putting ahead of public safety. Public safety comes first. Those other pieces should come and follow after that. I also want to, the second concern that I have is any monies that might be taken on should definitely go to land acquisition. Our number one strategic plan priority is to control growth. And the only way we can do that, the best way we can do that is by acquiring land and putting it into conservation. Certainly using the green space money has worked for us, and I hope that it continues to work for us, but we need to make sure that we have adequate funds available to acquire whatever land that we possibly can so that we can continue to control that, continue to hopefully provide some pervious land and some stormwater management throughout the island. But I also want the funds in a lockbox. I don't want money sitting there where by the whim of some council to come, that money begins to get spent in ways that it wasn't intended to be spent. And so that is one of the top things that I'll be looking for with any money that we take on, any debt that we take on, that it's being used for specific items as it addressed here in these discussions and not left open. Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. First of all, with regard to taking things off the table, I definitely want to make a careful review of that. I'm not saying today, let's just go through and line things out. It's got to be a careful review. The other thing in thinking about a land acquisition fund, if you will, is identifying an income stream. And I think briefly, Mr. Orlando talked about the possibility of using the debt service money as a land acquisition. And also, my question is about the real estate transfer fees. If we have dedicated revenue streams, then that's a different kind of financing tool we could use. So can we use real estate transfer fees as a dedicated revenue stream rather than taking the pot of money and spending that? So I think that's something maybe to think about as far as setting up perhaps a land acquisition fund. And then also, are there other types of revenue streams? And I think our bond counsel has talked to us about the possibility, and they've done presentations about this, about a mixed income stream where you pool the income streams together to create a larger amount to be used for certain projects. So I think that's something else that we ought to take a look at after we identify what our priorities might be.
Hold that until we have that conversation there, just as a placeholder in.
Yeah, I'm not saying
back
to
with
answer that question now. I'm throwing some additional thoughts out as we talk about the possibilities of how to fund projects.
Mr. Brown?
That's where we're going next, because I
That's
sort of feel like.
that's where we're going next.
Yeah, because, I think we sort of jump into conclusions about what we can afford and not afford before hearing from our very good finance directors.
So to wrap up that discussion about the CIP side, Mark, I think you've heard that there are a couple other things that need to be in consideration, whether it is on a piece of property we already own, whether it's a new piece of property that we purchase, or whether it's a building structure that we purchase. So I think you've gotten some direction from council, and I'm not speaking for every council member, but that's kind of what I heard.
Thank you. I feel that in facilities and land acquisition as we stack, and again, we're gonna come back to you with some of these solutions, policy in place, use of source of funds determination. We're gonna put that together after today and bring you back a proposal through committee and to town council. And I will talk to you all about this as well. I wasn't gonna go do that without the full confidence of council's conversations.
Yeah, and Mr. Hunter, to your point, the land acquisition manual, yes, we've got to look at that. We've got to review that. We've got to determine what the purpose of buying commercial buildings are, whether it's for economic development, green space, or whatnot. So that is a very important aspect. Okay, thank you.
Jumped the gun earlier. I wasn't always. John, this time for sure, sir. This time for sure.
Okay, great. I think kudos today to town council and previous town councils. Through their policies, they have established policies and practices to have some funds available, have some debt capacity available, and provided multiple revenue streams. And so those options are available to town council to consider. And so recently we had good news with the Standard & Poor's upgrade, and so we can all celebrate that as a community, and that does improve our access and increases demand for debt if town council chooses to use it, and access to capital markets, even if you don't use it, is valuable. So kudos there. And so there's a number of different options available to town council, and we listed out a few of these that we can talk about through the Beach Preservation Fee Fund, through the debt service accumulated fund balances, through the GO debt service millage, stormwater utility fee fund. We'll talk about that specifically next month in the workshop, but it's there as a revenue stream and as a potential use, because there's needs out there for stormwater as well. Potential for the establishment of a new tax increment financing district or TIF district, that option is available. Number of different pieces that you can do. And then we, the town, have options for cash on hand in various funds. And to speak to Councilwoman Becker's comments about lock boxes, we do keep these in funds. And so the beach fee has certain uses that are allowed, and the RETF has certain uses that are allowed, and we keep those in certain funds. And so you can know that that's happening now. And then council has the option to put additional criteria were they to choose and say, well, we're going to be even more specific than that, then we certainly can accommodate. So this is a lot of numbers, and they're really small on this page, but just know that our preliminary June 30 numbers are coming in very positively. Our fund balances compared to the policy levels that have just increased. And so I applaud town council for raising our policy levels in this budget process. So thank you for doing that. I think that's a big success, that those reserve policies, the town has room and capacity above those policies today, so that they could consider some this is one path to move forward if town council were to choose. Mark wanted to talk a little bit about the beach renourishment funding option.
I did. This is on track to what we talked about when we were together. We talked about is borrowing as least amount as possible, but maintaining our fund reserve as per expectation. One, we've got a couple goals that we're shooting for. One, the cash reserve went from 12 to 20 this year with some good cash management and placement, as well as your budget policy that is in place. That's a 20 million value, so we've met that. But we also have, I would call, an unwritten rule at this time where we are anticipating saving enough cash, called cash, enough reserve in 7 years to be current cash value of current contract, $47.5 million. To stay on track of that, we're pretty comfortable with that 60-40. I will say, and John pointed this out to me, and it's a good note to share, as long as I can find it. $19 million of debt is what we will ask for to borrow over 7 years, and that's different than last time, 30 million over 10 years. We're bringing that forward according to the schedule. Is that up there? Approximately 45.7. Next slide. There we see it. We're trying to bring this forward to you for second and final reading on October 21st. So we're starting that process right now. It shows up here that it goes to Finance and Administrative Committee on what the terms are. We haven't always brought debt and all those placements through Finance Committee. I'm following the process, and to keep us on track, I wouldn't say this is any urgency, but F&A in September, first reading in October, second reading in October, with some good work to do that I know Mr. McGowan knows very well, and especially with John here. This seems to be just on autopilot at this point. We'll bring it to you. So.
Yeah, if I can ask a question about the schedule, I appreciate it. And the schedule has got to be what the schedule is because of the steps we have to take. But we've spent a good bit of time talking about this. Now that I see these terms, I'm only one member of the Finance Administrative Committee, but I don't think it needs to come back to us. I think we're good to go. Like you say, it's almost on autopilot. Just bring it to us for first reading. I'll look at my other committee members and say, Patsy, you're out of line. I disagree with you.
I would like to see it go to committee, just for the public's benefit. I know we've had a lot of conversation about it, but I think that it would be worthwhile. And I'll let y'all speak up to that as well.
And it does align to our mission.
Brown?
I'm fine with it coming to the committee. I was laughing because guess the mayor trying to find some hot topics so we can get a crowd at my F&A meetings.
All right, yeah.
Mayor, I think it goes back to the committee. Thank you.
And I'm just going to say, we've had a workshop or two on this. You know, I'll defer to the balance of the committee on which I serve, but I'm just trying to move things along and to prevent undue staff time with something that's already been staffed.
I appreciate that. And it's been a little while since we've had that conversation, and I know we're having it here now. We're putting it out there, but I like it going back to the committee.
I'd like to talk about this. Thank you. I have two clarifying questions. So the first one is, did we pay off the 2017 beach renourishment bond?
Yes, they're paid up.
And did we collect the $7 million grant from FEMA?
That has not been collected, no. Part of that collection has to be spent first before we can collect it, and so it's reimbursement.
It's a reimbursement of the first phase of the work we're doing right now by deadline.
Okay, all right.
So we believe, and all systems go, right? We're all watching FEMA closely. We believe we'll be repaid, and that's hence the project got started.
And what is their typical reimbursement timeline?
I don't know that there's a typical in the past.
There's no typical, but I would hope, and I frame it as a hope, 6 months, but it's a starting point.
All right, so when I look at the proposal, you know, I've been pretty consistent. I want to borrow the least amount of money possible to fund this. And so that was one of the questions that I needed to answer for myself. And I think where you've landed with the 60-40 provides you the cover that you need for any unknown, like the reimbursement from FEMA. If you went to 70-30, that would just be a difference of $4,750,000. And you'd be pretty close to that $20 million minimum that you're supposed to be. So I think you have identified the right percentage based on that. The second item that I wanted to answer for myself is something that you mentioned. Will we be saving enough money to pay off the beach renourishment the next time in 7 years based on what we currently spend with maintenance as well as the payment that we'll need to pay on the debt? And when I look at that, we would have, you know, we collect about $14 million a year. We spend about $1 million on maintenance. The payment is $3.1 million, so we would net about $10 million a year. So you could do the math. 7 years, 70 million, 8 years, 80 million, 10 years, you know, 100 million. So that does not include any other projects that you might complete during that time, but I believe it answers that question, that it would provide you the money to be able to pay next time. Now, we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost and how much inflation is going to be, but it's certainly a healthy amount.
Appreciate that. And our goal is, as we look at this every year, to continue to calibrate the fund balance reserve upward. Your point, to continue to get it up there along the way.
Let me ask a question. If we're unfortunate enough to have a named storm affect our beaches and the fund has increased, it's got well more than the $20 million reserves, are we able to pull from that fund to do an emergency beach renourishment?
As a town council, you have that authority.
Because we can also look at it as additional reserves. So I just want to.
Yeah, we've learned, and I just traveled to Southwest Florida and saw the aftermath of a storm that occurred there 2 years ago. And I tell you, I've never seen impact of a storm that up close and personal 2 years later. And I will say, we will, if something like that happens, we will never have enough funds. So the fact that we are increasing this, we're going to run out of sand and money at some point. There's just never enough. So I appreciate that we have such a sensitive focus on increasing the emergency as well as the beach fund balances. Risk.
A few months ago, I had mentioned about protecting our investment. good time to mention this again, and we really, really, really need to focus on protecting our investment before the time that's due for a new beach renourishment. We'll never be able to chase the increase in the funds and keep up with the increasing construction cost. I mean, this started, our first beach renourishment was $6 million. We're at $47 million. So, you know, extrapolate that out. We need to look at an interim before our 6 to 8 year, 10-year cycle of somehow retaining what we have, bringing the money forward or spending the money that we've already saved at that time to do some armoring, do some growing work, get some permitting started, and protect our investment. And then our next beach renourishment may not be that bad if we protect our investment. But if we don't, and we do have a storm, like you said, we didn't do something we should have done, and I really think we need to look at it. It's so important.
So because the conversation of a storm and being able to afford when those types of things happen, I just wanted to point out and to give John Troyer a lot of the credit, who worked with council when we had Matthew, and we survived that, and we survived it in a very healthy way because of the good planning that took place financially. And if we add, Steve, your thoughts in terms of how we continue to upgrade and protect our asset, we'll even be in better shape. But the work that was done to get us through that storm, I just wanted to take a moment and thank John.
This conversation around storms, I feel like let's take a moment and pray them off. But, a few slides back, I think Mr. Troy was showing a $36 million reserve balance in disaster. A few years back, we went through an exercise to ask ourselves the question, is that relative to today? I think we might need to consider that again as we move into next fiscal year. The conditions have changed. Mr. Orlando, you mentioned that you've got a close eye on FEMA. We heavily rely on FEMA reimbursement, not just for sand. I mean, we got a lot of trees here. And with the stormwater situation being different than it was during Matthew, with more standing water, we may have more trees down than we did last time. That's a huge expense to the town for that cleanup. So I just think it's important for us to take another look at that moving forward. Obviously, can't predict the number, and to your point, we probably won't be able to save up to that number, but at least having the cash on hand to keep operating as we wait for reimbursements, and also have the bonding capacity, because that's one of the things that was a safe haul last time, was we had that bonding capacity to go get money so that we can get things back to the order of business, so we can get our economy going again. I think that's the biggest piece of this is, from a cosmetic standpoint, that's one thing, because some of the trees, you can still tell what happened during Matthew. The economy came back so quickly. That's where our focus needs to be. We have a discussion around if it's 36 million or not.
Just one quick thing. I hate to mention this as an example, but if you talk to folks in Western North Carolina about their experience, the impact on businesses and lives, and how long it's going to take to recover and how much, I think it could at least be some education on our part to take a look at what happened in the struggle and what's being done. Just think ahead.
This is all great. As a town manager, knowing that we have such strong cash, I would say fund balance position, but to hear town council say, put more away, but also balance that with some of our quality of life projects, including fire rescue. I will say, and it's important we just pay attention to that far right column. Those have increased dramatically over the last year, right? We went to the 23.9 as a percent of budget, right? We can adjust that in the next budget as well, upward. We went from 12 million minimum, I would say maximum, in the beach preservation fund account to a 20 million expectation. And you see what the balance is in the middle column. And then the disaster, we've carried 20 for a long time. And just this year, we increased that to 36. But you can see up there, the current balance already is 37.5. Mr. Troyer, not to put you on the spot, yesterday you announced that the Finance Administrative Committee, as you are closing out FY 25 budget, the underspend salary and whatnot, over project. What did you add to fund balance reserve yesterday?
Right.
An announcement as you announced it.
Yeah, we talked about putting an additional 12 million into the general fund balance, and that includes the ATAX settlement. But yes,
5 million. So subtract 5 from that. So we're very conservative here. I appreciate this, because walking in the room, I'm always nervous that I don't want to just say, hey, let's go spend to spend, right? And you know that about me, and it's very healthy to hear that collectively from y'all.
okay. Just a picture of our debt outstanding. You can see from 2018 a consistent decrease in our outstanding debt outstanding, and even 2025, even with our fire rescue lease, our number will reduce in 2025 as well. So we can feel good about that. Debt service funds accumulated as a source. One of the things that we talked about a little bit is what's an appropriate level for our debt service fund balance. And in looking at that, our current reserve is more than what we're thinking would be a necessary reserve. And so that's an opportunity, if council were to choose, to deploy some cash funds, just from a legal procedural method. It's been taxed as debt service, and so in order to use it, it would need to be deployed as to payment of debt. And so you would borrow money, but you could pay it back very quickly and be able to include this or some of this in a CIP solution, and it would still serve the purpose that it's been planned for with the public all along. And so, and I would suggest, and that's just a suggestion, and you can consider that in the next year's budget process, is let's go ahead and put a minimum debt service fund balance of $2.5 million. And I think that's a number that would, I think would be a good start. So 14.2, more than plenty, 2.5 at least to keep a minimum there, and whatever council may choose. It's something to look at, but this would be one of the levers that town council could deploy if they were to choose. General obligation funding strategies. And so we looked at our debt service capacity, our ability, our capacity to make payments. And so there's about 2 mils worth in our current 5.1 millage in our debt service millage. And so we looked at a couple of different scenarios, several different scenarios. What would that provide if town council wanted to deploy some of that? If we wanted to take 1 year's worth or 5 years worth or 10 years worth, what would that look like? And that would be deployed in a similar way. And so town council could choose to issue debt, and then the payments would be supported by this debt service millage that's already in place. It's 5.1, and so the expectation would be to continue at the same tax rate. And town council could choose, do we want to pay that back over 1 year, and that's a step, and do we want to take it over 5 years or a different number of years, and all of those would be choices that town council can make depending on their appetite for debt and their choices on paybacks. And so what we're trying to get to is to say, okay, our timeline would be a little bit after the beach bonds. If town council were to go down this route, and our thought would be to close before June 30th. So that's, before we finish the fiscal year. So,
And John, I just, if you back up a little bit, does that make sense for everybody? I don't want to pause too long if we don't need to. When we adopted the budget this year, you adopted a consolidated budget that has 6 funds in it, right? What you're not seeing up here is any assessment of capacity in our general fund. We are not presenting that to you. We are simply bringing back to you what we said we would at budget adoption. First reading, second reading, workshop discussions included, where we said we are setting the millage in the debt service fund at 5.1. However, we don't need that entire amount. And we also realized with a strong, really deep dive assessment that we paid so much debt off, we now have millage, right? We have millage that's accruing. You had a choice to make. Reduce the millage. We reduced 2 mills out of the general fund, but you didn't reduce any millage in the debt. So instead, what you said is bring this back to us and let's look at that 2 mills, but then also look at the value of the cash or the reserve that's in there. As we talked collectively, we talked utilizing that reserve potentially for some land acquisition. And then we also talked about that millage over a 1-year term. We have to borrow the money out because that's how it was accrued. I think that's the simple way to explain it. We have to borrow the money out of debt millage because that's how it was accrued in debt millage. But while we're doing it, you have to make a decision whether what you're doing with that excess mill capacity. Are you borrowing just 1 year and arguably pushing that to next fiscal to decide? Or are you going to consider a 5, 10, 15, whatever year while we're thinking of town hall, fire rescue, and some of the land acquisition and some of that other portfolio stack of dollar? So that's what the next slide should tell you or help you think through.
So it's interesting, as I sat and thought about how did we get to this place where we have all this fund balance, a couple of items came up to me. Our debt payments have been decreasing as we are paying off debt, and we haven't offset the millage in relationship to that. And on a positive, our property tax values continue to go up. And so since it's millage against your assessment, we're able to collect more money as well. So that's how we accumulate a balance. And it's interesting that we have a balance in there, but the way this works, unlike business, is that we collected this money saying we were using it for debt. So the only way we can access that balance is to issue debt. I know it sounds funny, but that's the way this works in government. And so if we want access to it, we've got to actually put a bond out so that we can capture it. And that's important because that's why we said we were collecting the money, and so we need to live into that. So so you have that piece that you've talked about that we can access. And then there is the 2 mills that on an ongoing basis, that we don't necessarily need to cover our current debt. And if I look at the assessed value, looks like 2 mills is probably about $2.4 million a year that we will continue to collect in excess and build that money up. So then it becomes a question of, like you said, if we want to continue to collect that money and apply it to debt. And so the numbers on page with the payback periods, that's strictly for the 2 mills. And then you could add back on top of that the fund balance that is already sitting out there today.
Yes, ma'am.
So you've got 2 pieces that you can pull to gather money.
Thank you.
and town council can direct how those funds are spent as well, so. And our very capable John McGowan will take the next slides.
Okay, great. John, before you dive in, what is, just let's, as a reminder, on top of this, what is that cash number we will pull out in the reserve? Is it 13 million with
11.7.
11.7? Okay.
Somewhere in that range.
That's so we keep the 2.5 million in reserve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, yeah, and some of what I'm going to talk about, Melinda, you just brought up, so that's great. And, we're digging in a little deeper into the debt service millage to pay for capital projects. As we all know, debt service millage can only be used to pay for debt service on general obligation bonds. And just to solidify some numbers here, yes to 5.1 mils this year. A mill is equal to about 1.33 million in property tax collections. So if we do the simple math, one mill at 1.33 million times 5.1 mils gives us about 6.8 million. And I hate to contradict my boss here, but we did lower our debt service last year, millage from 5.5 to 5.1, in addition to the lowering of the operating millage. So most of the 5.1 millage will go to pay existing geo debt. About pretty much three of those 5.1 mils, and the rest we can use for additional debt service. Onto the scenarios. And we asked our financial advisor, First Tryon, to run these scenarios, obviously 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And we're basically asking the question, how many dollars in bond proceeds could we receive if we issued bonds with payback periods of these number of years? Yes, very conservative assumptions on the value of a mill. We're assuming the value of a mill stays the same. That's not usually the case. I think there may have been a case or two in past years where our assessed value and thus our value of a mill has been lowered, but those are rare exceptions. This year, our value of a mill went up over 5%. So that's a fantastic year. We're not expecting that. So we're keeping things flat in that assumption. The interest rates are higher than the market right now, but then again, we're not selling today, so we don't know what it would be when we're selling bonds, if and when we sold bonds. So if we use 15 years as an example, we know we can borrow approximately $30 million with 2 mills and pay it back in 15 years. And then that would still leave us plenty of capacity, given likely AV increases and debt roll-off, debt maturity, to issue additional debt within a couple of years. We'll go through the next slide, the proposed schedule of possible general obligation bonds. We know we have a F&A committee on October 30th, where we would review the plan of finance and the draft ordinance. There's a town council meeting that following week where we do the first reading. Second reading would be at the next council meeting in December. There's a lot going on in the background relating to publishing notice of sales, meeting with the rating agencies, et cetera. But we would look at a closing of late February, and as others have mentioned, have that first principal and interest payment pretty quickly by municipal bond standards, a little over 2 months after the close. And we would use roughly 11.7 million of that accumulated debt service fund balance to pay a big chunk of it off right away. And that 2.2 mils, which equals about 2.6 million to cover some of that debt service as well. And we could do that as a 1-year borrowing. That could be the first year of a multi-year borrowing. Okay. All right, on to other potential sources of.
I'm sorry. If
financing.
we could
Yeah,
just
please.
pause back on the,
fine.
and you
Hold on
want
one
to,
second.
I wanted to talk about the timeline. So the timeline's coming up pretty fast. So
Yes.
October discussion, and I'm just thinking in my own mind, what would I want to see in order to decide if I would want to have more debt? And so I would ask you, what would you have prepared for us at that meeting?
Takeaways from today, before we leave, I'm going to ask you once again what your appetite is, what your tolerance is for the length of borrow. Then I'll know what to prepare. I believe that I've heard facilities, town hall, fire rescue, and land. I would prepare a strategy based upon the amount of borrowed dollars. Well, in addition to that, what would you, go ahead.
I'll make sure we're clear on what we're talking about here. I understand this timeline to be associated with our ability to borrow against the fund balance, correct? Is this the conversation about the continual of the 2.5 mil that is still in capacity, a bigger conversation about a longer length of borrow? Am I correct that there are two conversations that we're looking to have, or because it seems to me, if we're trying to have the bigger conversation, this timeline is sort of aggressive, okay? So I just want to make sure we get clear that we potentially talking about two different things. Is that correct?
Well, not to say no, I'm not disagreeing. It's just, to me, it's the same thing. It's millage and it's cash in the debt. We can split it in two ways because we need some more time to think through it. Absolutely. But at the very least, we need to pledge at least 2 mils of revenue prior to the end of this fiscal year, right? And so it seems quick. It's August with new money, new budget, July 1. It goes fast in that sense in terms of scheduling. But yeah, we need two answers. One, we have to take the dollars out of the cash reserve, call it what you will. We have to pledge at least 1 year of that millage to justify the 5.1 mils. And you can do that for 1 year so that when Beaufort County understands how we're using the money, it's pledged properly, right? We're collecting for specific purpose as we pledged. And if some of these other projects take a little longer outside of that schedule, we can split it that way.
So to that point, on 10/30, would you be prepared to give us the big list?
Yes, I will be. And you can decide at the time whether that's your tolerance today or split that in half and deal with the year one. But I would also ask you today to give me some guidance, since we're all sitting in the room here, to know what to do.
I'm strongly in favor of moving ahead promptly and relatively expeditiously with regard to dealing with the 5.1 millage problem. But in terms of the overall approach, I'm also very much in favor of moving forward with consideration of additional borrowing as well. And from my point of view, the conservative approach for municipality borrowing for a municipality is to keep the cash, as much cash on hand as you can, because you don't know what's coming along in the future. Have the cash available, you can deal with it. If you have used your cash at the present time instead of borrowing, and a problem comes along, then you've got to borrow. Right now, we have a very good rating. Who knows what ratings will be in potentially very different circumstances. So from my perspective, the most conservative approach is to use as much borrowing as you can and keep as much cash on hand. There are obviously some economic aspects, such as interest rates. How much are you going to pay to borrow the money? Indicates it's pretty low. What's the interest rate on return on the cash that we have? It's much higher right now, as I understand it. That tells you also as another factor to keep your cash on hand and borrow the money. Lastly, who's the group of taxpayers that's paying for the improvements? Get to dealing with major improvements. If you use your cash now, it means people up till this point are using their money to pay for an improvement that they're not getting any benefit of, because it comes in the future. When you borrow the money, it's being paid for over time by the people who are using it. There are a number of factors in my mind that suggest we ought to shoot for as much borrowing as we reasonably can.
That's similar. That's the feedback I'm looking for. So that's helpful. It's just a matter of.
Keep on.
Okay, on to another source of capital project funding is TIFs. Tax increment financing. Most people in the room are probably familiar with TIFs because we have one on the island. It's in the process of closing. We'll talk about its successes here in a couple of minutes, but I just want to review what a TIF district is and how it works. South Carolina gives towns and cities and counties the ability to designate a specific geographic area as a TIF district. I'll just note that a successful TIF depends on cooperation from partner districts, overlapping districts. In our case, that would be Beaufort County schools, any PSD that would overlap in the TIF is drawn. The property values within the TIF district are frozen at the values at the time of the forming of the TIF. So let's assume if we were to do a TIF, we'd form it in fiscal year 27. All of the taxing districts would continue to receive the property tax revenues based on the frozen fiscal year 27 values throughout the life of the TIF. And then any incremental property tax value increases above and beyond that frozen value are used to pay for public improvements. And if things go as planned, these public improvements should stimulate private investments, and property value should increase, and property tax collection should increase. In most cases, as TIFs are formed, TIF bonds are issued. The proceeds from the TIF bonds are used to pay for the capital projects, and then as those incremental revenues come in on an annual basis, that's used to pay back the bonds. If there's any additional funds available over and above, and there usually is, the debt service payment, that can be used directly to pay for capital projects. Sense? Okay. Yeah, I think really I just kind of summarized what's on the next couple of pages. Go to the our TIF on the island. This TIF is in the process of closing. It was a 25-year TIF, and I'm relatively new here to the island, but from what I understand, the entire USCB campus, Low Country Celebration Park, all of the Coligny beach area related improvements, Matthews Drive widening, and multiple land acquisitions that were used for various projects, including parks and beach parking, all were paid for with the TIF. We had great participation from the county and the school district and the PSD as well, by the way. So no additional funds are being collected. That ended in June of 25. We did have a final TIF bond payment on June 1, so the bonds are retired, and we do have an outstanding balance that we expect to expend within this calendar year. Yeah, this is also kind of a rehash of what I just talked about, but that last bullet point I think is the takeaway. As property values within the TIF district increase, these incremental property taxes pay for the capital projects within the TIF. Okay. As far as a timeline, this is more of a list of critical events. We've talked with our bond counsel, Berforman, and they estimate that a minimum amount of time required here is 9 months. There's a lot going on. We need to work with the county. We need to work with the overlapping districts. We likely would have a TIF consultant who would help us form the TIF and draw the TIF. We'd be working with our bond counsel and our financial advisor on a bond issue. And there's also some public notice periods, including, I think, a 45 one day is listed there. So that adds to the time frame. So realistically, it's fiscal year 27 when this would get launched. One other source of funding we'll spend a couple of minutes on is grants. We have a good history of receiving grants from various sources. This page is limited to grants used for capital projects. We've had a good relationship with the Community Development Block Grant Program through HUD. Those are 3 of the parks that were at least partially funded last year via that program. We are casting a wider net starting in fiscal year 25 on some grants we didn't necessarily pursue in the past. We hope to see some funding associated with these. The Senator Lindsey Graham earmark program is, we did apply the prior year, we weren't successful, so we've got 2 proposals in to that program this year. We expect to hear something by September, October. We're not counting this money at all, but we have applied for a significant amount of funds. And certainly there's plenty of towns and cities in South Carolina who've benefited from these programs. The Wexford Pathway Project is just runs parallel to 278, just south of Town Hall here, or will run there. we already know we're getting $500,000 in fiscal year '26, and we expect to get at least $500,000 more in fiscal '27. These numbers do not include any intergovernmental agreement funding. There's nothing here on county green space funding. Obviously, that's a major source of help on land acquisitions, and no FEMA money is counted here as well. So that's kind of a review of our options, and any other questions or comments?
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, so, that's a question first on the, potential grants.
Yep.
About $12 million that we're going after with Senator Graham's office. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to understand that process. We just send him a note and say we want some money, or we have people up there knocking on his door all the time saying, don't forget about us, and don't come tell us some good jokes during the chamber state of the region. I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, it's an annual program. I don't know how far back it goes. Like I said, we first applied 2 years ago. It tends to, the announcements tend to occur in the spring. I think it was April of this year. And we have a relatively short period, but we knew it was coming, so we had our 2 proposals pretty much set up. Yeah, there's a formal form on their website to fill out. We were in touch with their senior staff. We got letters of endorsement, by the way, from several elected officials in and around the area. Thank you, Mayor Perry, for your help on that. So yeah, we intend to apply annually. They list on their website who has received those grants in the past, and there's some serious dollars awarded to cities and villages and towns across the state.
Is there an opportunity for us to learn when the letter of decline comes back to us as to what we could have done differently?
We hope it's a letter of acceptance, but either way, yeah, it's public information. Obviously, we're happy to share that with you, yeah. Hopefully, if we weren't to get it, we would talk to the staff and try to learn on, from our submissions on maybe what we can do next year to make it potentially more successful.
I appreciate staff looking outside of the box to get us in the hopper. I'm just wanting to talk out loud about some other potential influences, because these folks, they come saying a lot about Hilton Head when it's campaign time, but we need to see some dollars coming back our way as well, particularly with us being the economic driver that we are, so.
And a little bit of add to that is we have not ever aligned with any lobbyists to go talk with folks. We do talk with their folks that are local and regional and at the state level as often as we can. I think we had a meeting the other day. They come in and see our grants administrator extraordinaire, Michelle Bunce, and she has taken upon herself to start connecting in Columbia differently and better, as well as through these programs differently and better. So we're using the channels that their staffers have in place, not outside those lines yet, though. I will say that, as we talk other projects, one example is we're looking for dollars in the state. Time in Columbia helps, and sometimes that's people sitting around this table getting up to Columbia, and you'll see that from us. It's not on here, as we're seeking earmark in the South Carolina budget, whether through DOT or overall in the budget with Senator Davis, looking for dollars for the William Hilton Parkway corridor. So relationships matter. I understand that. We've been successful at it, but I'll tell you, I'm pleased because when we're looking away, we have a newer person that's on our staff that's pushing on this. We just have not worked with any lobbyists at the federal government level.
And my other comment was around the TIF district. Definitely in favor of us having that conversation. I think it's a good opportunity for us as we closing out the past TIF. We took a dive at the FNA meeting and learned that when we look at the allocation of funds based on the boundary lines, there's some question about how equitable that was, right? So I just challenge us this time around to be very conscious of that. Obviously we have had.
Is that the presentation?
influential increases in property values in the areas that we invested. And that is the whole intent. So as we look at areas that have been left behind in the past, and knowing that we've got, some larger projects on our plate, that we don't make that same misstep on this occasion. I can get into more detail about that, but I just want to make a very broad statement while we're talking about TIF and getting ready to have that discussion.
Other questions, comments, Ms. Becker?
Actually, most of mine were just answered. However, I do want to put an emphasis on the fact that whenever a grant is being written or one that's been rejected, it's always good to circle back and get as much information and feedback as possible to correct whatever errors. Sometimes they're the simplest things that need to be corrected. And so I'm happy to hear that you're doing that. And also I wanted to thank our town manager and staff, assistant deputy town managers for their efforts. I think that in the regard of building those relationships, it behooves all of us on town council as well as you guys to make those relationships. We do not need to depend on anyone else to do that for us. And I want to make sure I make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Bryson?
Yes, can you go back to the TIF district proposed schedule?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think I heard you say, based on all those different critical events or steps, that we'd be looking at FY 2027 for the,
Well, certainly,
to start it.
if it's a minimum of 9 months, we're really realistically looking.
Right,
at
right.
rolling, yeah.
Yeah, so I understand that. So somewhere in the process is identifying where the location would be and what kind of projects we're looking at. Which step is that in the critical event list? Is it the preparation of redevelopment plan where we define the area and the proposed projects?
I would say it would be number 1, right, Mark? Yeah.
Yes, it's number 1.
Yeah. So in order to get to that preparation, will we not need some information, some ideas for us to talk about before we get to step number 1? And so what is the timing that we're thinking about to do that? And then when does the town council need to weigh in on where we think it ought to be and what kind of projects it ought to be?
I'll help with that. I would say if we look at this in phases and buckets, beach preservation right now, the geo debt millage next, and then TIF after that. I think that the timing of this has to coincide with your consideration of the William Hilton Parkway Corridor Master Plan, and some of that work on the parts of the island and in areas of revenue that we aren't necessarily talking about today, right? I think we said the maximum capacity of 2 mills was $38 million. If we're looking at facilities, there's not much left over for this work. So I'd say realistically, this is getting into the end of this fiscal year into next fiscal year before we start trying to put that redevelopment plan in place. I think by then, of course, we'll have the William Hilton Parkway Corridor Master Plan. We'll be through some of this public policy that you're talking about lately. We'll be through having that land management ordinance on your desk and moving on and forward. So from your capacity and mine, I think late fiscal year this and or early fiscal year next, from a time standpoint.
So I'm glad that you set out that schedule because I listed that we're looking at 3 funding sources for various kind of projects. Beach Preservation Fund, which of course we need to pay for the work that is happening right now. And then the Debt Service Fund is the next bit to chew off. And for that, we need an idea of what projects we're looking at and some sort of gross estimate of cost to look at what we want to bite off, and if that's acceptable. And then lastly, the TIF district would be funding. And the only other question I've got is that the one that I mentioned earlier, and that is there any benefit to having, and I apologize, I don't remember the exact kind of bond issue that it's called, but it's based on dedicated revenue streams where you can mix them together to generate more funds in order to do more projects. And all I can think of is calling it the mixed income stream issue. But is there some benefit at looking at that before we take maybe the debt service fund step? And I don't want to mix in stormwater fees. I want to keep those separate for now. But just a question, because are we overlooking a possible another avenue of looking at funds for projects that are needed or we think have some priority?
We'd be glad to look at that, and that would be our conversations with the FA and Bond Council, yes.
And we've had some discussions already, and I think even before I got here, Mark, you were having discussions. It's, I think our short-term conclusion was we're better off doing it in these big pieces, as in geo, stormwater, TIF, et cetera. But certainly we can revisit it. You know, we have a new FA as of probably 5 months ago or so. Having AAA from 3 agencies and high AA's on our special revenue bonds, usually we don't, towns rated that highly don't have to go that route.
If I'm not mistaken, when we met with Franny and team, it actually came with a higher cost on an interest rate. It had some different caveats to it, so.
Yeah, and there's an annual appropriation, which number one is future town councils could decide not to appropriate. So that makes the bonds more risky, so that means you're gonna pay a high interest rate relative to
Not appropriation clause, yeah.
It's a different various revenue bands, and establishing that is a lot more complicated than this. You have to establish a nonprofit. The nonprofit, transfers through into those dollars. And so as we started looking at the cost, the complexity, and our ability to simply borrow the funds targeted towards our priorities and align it that way, we didn't push too much further on that last time. We can dust it off, and when we come back and talk to you, we will definitely show you that, to show you some pros and cons of both.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because we'd had discussions about it before, and you're giving me more information now that you've gone back and done an analysis. And I understand the difference between picking what is easiest to do and what has the most benefit without the number of steps and the number of conditions. So there is a difference there, and also the difference in cost. But I want to make sure that we had carefully considered that before we start picking and just doing clumps of money here and there.
Other comments, questions? Well, I'll say that, huh?
We're about to close up. I got one.
Well, no, I was gonna let the public speak.
I'll wait till after that.
Okay. I'm just gonna state that I'm in favor of, obviously what's been proposed on beach, in terms of our debt. We need to have that conversation as to, 1 year, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, whatever that number is. But I think you've got interest there, and then on the TIF, I'm definitely interested in that as well. So with that said, Kim, do we have anybody signed up to speak? Okay. Remember, state your name, address.
Dave Ferguson.
Good afternoon, Dave Ferguson, Shipyard. Really good conversations today, and it's really good to hear all the council members participate and give input to it. It's very technical for residents to hear, especially some of the financial guys. So to a lot of residents right now, it's always going to be just talk. And one of the things I always talk about to all of you is action. Capital improvement projects may sound very technical and detailed, but in reality, they shape how we live here on Hilton Head. Not just now, but for years to come, as you've mentioned today. Roads, drainage, parks, public facilities. These aren't just projects. They're actually investments in the quality of the life for every resident on this island. That's why it's so important that further discussion keeps residents at the center. We've all heard everyone on the island's concerns about overdevelopment, traffic, housing, protecting our environment, safety, etc. The capital plan should be a tool to address these very challenges, not just a list of scattered projects. So I agree that you're gonna have to whittle them down. Every decision should answer one question, though. Does this make Hilton Head stronger, safer, and more livable for the residents? We also have to be clear about the difference between wants and needs. There's no shortage of good ideas, but money and time are limited. Residents expect council to prioritize essentials, infrastructure, stormwater, public safety, etc., before spending on projects that may be nice things to have and people-pleasing, but don't solve problems. And then there's the old thing I like to talk about all the time, accountability. Capital projects are some of the biggest checks this town will ever write. With that comes a lot of responsibility. Clear budgets, realistic timelines, and public updates are what really build trust. Residents deserve to see not just approval, but progress. So as you work through all of this after today's workshop, I encourage you to think of this not just as a plan of projects, but as a plan of priorities. Focus on what matters most to the people who live here. Spend wisely and be completely transparent about results. Capital projects aren't just bricks and pavement. They're the backbone of Hilton Head's future. Let's make sure they reflect what the community wants and what's overall best for everyone in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Busy.
So non-agenda items, correct?
No, it's on that, it's on what we just talked about.
Oh, I signed up for non-agenda items.
Okay. Well, you can go ahead, We'll let you go ahead. You're here.
Good afternoon, Richard Busy, Indigo Run. I want to switch gears for a moment for the next 3 minutes. I want to talk about FAR, floor area ratio. Not exactly a household term on Hilton Head. Most residents probably have never heard of it, but it is important in controlling the density of development, and that should concern all of us. In 2024, this town council, or the previous town council technically, voted 5-0 to reduce the so-called FAR requirements from 0.55 to 0.45 times the area of the lot of a single-family residence. The intent was very clear, to regulate the volume and the bulk of homes more efficiently. Mayor Perry, Alex Brown, Tammy Becker, Patsy Bryson, and Steve Alfred all voted yes. The problem, the change only applies to the Forest Beach neighborhood. The reduction in FAR to all Hilton Head neighborhoods, except for the gated communities, is critical if you really want to protect the island's character. But the mayor has refused to place it on the agenda, leaving island neighborhoods subjected to the same overbuilt environment. And yet, Mr. Mayor turns a deaf ear to the residents of those neighborhoods which have been destroyed. There are many hotels, MINI, that have been constructed in the past 18 months that would not have been allowed had the town council approved the reduction in so-called FAR requirements for all neighborhoods. Mr. Mayor, you should bring this issue to the full council. Withholding it from the agenda prevents the democratic process from playing out. While you have the authority to set the agenda, that role comes with the responsibility to ensure open and fair deliberation, not to control the outcome. You have one vote, just like every other council member, right? Well, true leadership means fostering transparency and not limiting discussion. Do the right thing and allow this matter to be debated by the full council and to be fully and fairly considered. Why are you doing this? This is unjust, it's wrong. What are you afraid of? Let the full council decide this issue once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Palmer Simmons.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Palmer Simmons, Spanish Wells Road resident. And I guess I sort of rise to just try to have a better understanding and just to say a little bit about what I understood the capital improvements to really be. We talked a lot about, or there's been a lot of discussion about capital improvements. There's been some discussion about land acquisition. And I'm not sure the two go together, but I think the capital improvements that have been discussed are just the regular obligations the town may have for the residents of Hilton Head. And I think those that are on the agenda for capital improvements definitely should proceed. But when you hear that our fire and our town itself are crumbling, I'm not sure where that lies as capital improvements are just a matter of need. And I think everyone can appreciate that the citizens of Hilton Head always look for the best from our town and for the citizens here. So, and one of the things also I think that deserves mentioning at this point, it was deferred from an agenda item, of course, is our storm drain. I just would like to take a quick opportunity to say, if you look into the communities along Spanish Wells Road, after all of these rains, it's really a horrible situation. So as you look at all of the capital improvements and the need of the town, we really need to find a way to address a complete drainage plan, and that's been the big issue here. There's not a complete drainage plan that I'm aware of that the town really has. And also, I guess I have to say as well, I'm not sure how much land does the town really need. There's a lot of talk about land acquisition and the monies that are available for that. And I just have the question, how much land does the town really need? I see a lot of the town-owned properties that are just sitting. Maybe it serves a direct purpose, maybe it doesn't. I guess that bears further explanation. But just want to share those quick thoughts from the discussion that I heard today. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have.
That's all we have. Anybody signed up for non-agenda? That's everybody? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for your comments. Any last thing from council before we adjourn? Mr. Brown?
I think, I'm hopeful that town manager heard what I'm in favor of moving along. I think we need to be very aggressive in not only completing what we have on the table, but finding the funding to move forward with those critical items, i.e. town hall, facilities, and I think we need to have a little bit more nimblism when it comes to land acquisition. I think the land acquisition piece is important when we start to talk about growth management. I've said out loud, and I'm not bashful in saying that at my soul, I'm a property rights guy, okay? So I struggle sort of with us talking about growth management and taking people's property rights away. But if we can find willing and participant sellers that don't want to develop, then it's in our best interest as far as curbing development and preserving green space to go so. And I think having monies on hand to do that puts us in a better position. A few other things that you mentioned, Mr. Orlando, when it comes to the dirt road paving program, along with the pathway programs where we already have monies allocated, it seems that we are stalling out to a degree because of this policy issue around either acquisition or donation. Mr. Mayor, I think that is within our strat plan, okay? And I think it's high time for us to have a conversation about what that looks like moving forward. It's too important, particularly now with the stormwater issue that we're having. Folks are having trouble getting home, all right? So I think there's a way for us to come up with a creative solution around that. So I'd ask Mr. Mayor to allow me and town manager to sort of work through something that we could present to council as far as that's concerned. And the same thing with the pathway programs. You know, there are areas on Hilton Head that are in need of pathway systems, and we just haven't been able to have a qualified conversation with the individuals. You know, we understand what we need to do collectively, but from an individual standpoint, I think we need a little bit more flexibility around policy to move things along more expeditiously.
Thank you. Ms. Price?
Two things. First of all, responding to Mr. Simmons' inquiry about stormwater, we are going to be having a workshop on stormwater. I think it's the end of September, and perhaps the manager can confirm that date in just a minute. But in addition to that, I understood that we were trying to come up with some priorities. We haven't quite gotten there yet. We've named, I think, 3 major ones: the fire and rescue, what to do about town hall, especially the disrepair situation, and then land acquisition. And then we've said that there's this long list in the CIP, and we need to look at that and carefully look at that. So I think maybe if we ask the town manager to come back to us when he comes back to us on a proposal of what kind of funding to use for the debt service funding. What are the big chunks of items? How much would they cost? And then perhaps recommendation on some of those other ones that might be the staff thinks are priorities to include in that funding list, since we've identified 3 and said we need more time to look at the rest. So if the town manager and his staff could come back with us, to us with the list at that same time on the debt service funding issue. I trip over my words. I hope that was understandable. But can we get the date on this stormwater workshop?
The date, I think it's the 30th? Yes,
September 30th.
Yeah.
Here, 1 o'clock, town hall.
It'll be advertised, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Ms. Becker?
Thank you. 2 things that I just heard that's not consistent with what it was that we spoke about over the last couple of hours. I asked for a priority to include the assessment that we are working on with regard to public safety. And I think that that should be included on that list. And then secondly, we were also here to discuss not just adding to, but revising perhaps what we have already and where we could, as Councilwoman Tunner suggested, take off. This process needs to keep in mind that we are indeed not just a limited government, but we also have to live within our means. And there are some projects that we, given the new priorities, should go back and look at. And as it was suggested from the beginning, we were supposed to identify places where we might want to retract some of our previous items on those lists. And so I don't want to lose sight of that. Sometimes we get to these wrap-up moments. A lot of the comments are made and they get written down, and all of the comments aren't included. And I hope that this today will not be another one of those cases. So those 2 items need to be added to the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Hunter?
I want to thank the town manager and the staff for the package that you put together. I think it was, although it might be difficult for the public, which I get, I thought it was easy to understand, well laid out, and I think we had great conversation today regarding all of these topics. So my hat's off to you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so, Mr. Brown, you got something else? Can you hit your button?
Once again, I'm trying to make this clear and easy for Mr. Orlando. So as you come back, potential projects and potential costs, at that point, we see that we have to borrow or spend more than we could ever pay for, then that then drives us into a discussion of what are we going to take off the list. Because I'm trying to get a better understanding of that, because I don't want to give you direction to come back and tell us what you recommend we take off the list. I'm trying to figure out how we get to that point. I understand, sort of the logic of being conservative, but I think Mr. Alfred made a really good point about a further definition of being conservative in the government world. So I just don't want us to get to a point where we've already either approved and spent money or conceptually approved projects in the current CIP. So I just want to make sure we're focused on moving forward and not getting to a point where we're trying to have a discussion about which park we're going to do or not, right? So I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with putting you in that predicament before we understand the true picture, that's all.
Ms. Donner?
I just think it's good fiscal responsibility to understand what the total is, and then when we have the total, have a conversation about how we feel about that. When I look at these items that were added, I can imagine they're going to be big numbers. And so how much do we want to bite off? And it might not just be about removing, but delaying. I said phasing. There is already a lot on the table. And quite candidly, I don't know today if we have enough funds moving forward to pay for the items that are already here. So that's a question that I have. Would we need to borrow to live into what's already in this package? And then we're adding on other projects. So I just feel like there's more information that personally I'm going to need before making a decision. And as always, I appreciate Mr. Alfred's comments about government funding and things to think about. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Becker?
I think Melinda said it best, as she does. She's very eloquent. But I do want to keep us focused on what we have and what we can spend. And if that does mean a delay rather than a removal, that is a much better way of saying it. But at some point, you run out of other people's money to spend. And so I'd like to keep our eye on the ball of the residents who live on Hilton Head and what it is that we have within our budget, and make sure that we are not overextending ourselves to satisfy, as someone had said, the wants versus the needs.
Thank you. So, yeah.
Sorry, just one quick thing. I just want to check back with the town manager to make sure that he has the answer to the questions that he wanted us to address today.
You would think that we rehearsed that. That was good, because I have some notes here, because I think I can help with what y'all are asking, right? I did ask, I started out by saying, what projects are your highest priorities over 5 years? And put the words in there, quality of life focus. What is the town council's comfort level with bonding capacity? Frankly, I don't have that clarity today, but I understand why. You're asking about project, I'm asking about capacity. You're talking horse, I'm talking cart, or I'm talking horse, you're talking cart. They both have to go together. I said, also, are any projects on the list needed, right? Urgency, opportunity, community benefit to accelerate? Are they aligned with the strategic plan? And so I do this every day, all day. So to me, it's all together, and I don't think we always figure that out in every workshop. We've been here for 2.5 hours. We know that we're going to bring forward a beach preservation bond somewhere in the $19 million range. We know that there's available $11.7-ish million in the GEO debt fund reserve, right, in that debt fund. That continues to keep a good fund balance in there at 2.5 or 2.6, 2.5. We know that the GEO debt fund millage, as we talked about today and prior, there's 2 mils of capacity available, and that's approximately 1 mil is 1.3. Yeah, 1 mil is 1.3 and it goes up every time we look, but let's just say 2 mils is $2.4 million, whatever the math. We have somewhere between 2.4, which is 1 year of borrow, because we have to justify 5.1 mils. And you said it so elegantly earlier. I wish I wrote everything down you said, but you explained that property taxes went up. Borrow was paid back, and our millage, we didn't ratchet down fast enough. We ratcheted down some, but not all. So you have in the debt, the GO debt fund millage, 2 mils, 2.4 million 1 year, 38.9 million, 25 years. SWU, we're gonna talk next month. I think 1 million, or Jeff thinks 1 million, I think 2 million. If we can compress SWU, do we borrow it and fix some of these projects today? But that's simple math. It's $2 million over 10 years, 20 years. We can look at it that way. And back in TIF district, we know that we're going to look at this later on in FY26, most likely early 27. We know as well how we've been building projects for the last 4.5, 5+ years was simply revenue streams and attaching the sources of revenue with the uses of revenue annually. What you didn't talk about today yet, but you see the emails, you hear the county talk, the Beaufort County sales tax project list. We're going to have to talk whether you want a project or two of that list on that list, or are you going to opt out and not suggest any projects on that list? It's my job to simply figure out your, I would call it your tolerance for borrow. I will bring that back to you. The good questions you're asking, what to slow down, if we're speeding up, what to push out, not eliminate versus do today. All of that is through your capital planning and your programming and your budget amendment. So just because we're going to borrow dollars doesn't mean I'm going to just unilaterally attach those dollars to, say, fire rescue headquarters. That's a budget amendment. And I would do that with you and through our budget process. Keep in mind, we're gonna start getting together early in January, and we're gonna start talking about capital projects, probably this year a lot better than last year because we now have that 5-year. So it's almost on your mark, get set, go. Today is on your mark. I think get set is understanding where the dollar, your tolerance for borrow is, and go as you reset your budget. So
I thought of one other thing to bring to the table as we talk, the schedule of when the other bonds are going to be paid off. So if there's bond payoff in the next 5 years, 10 years, that also helps to reduce the amount of millage that we would need to require in order to cover. So I think that's an important piece of information.
that's good. We'll have that. And I imagine, John McGowan put that schedule together. I'm looking at it, and just frankly, I'm sitting here saying, no way. But John says yes, so I'm going to respect that. Now you know why I say no way. But I think that even if we had 1 or 2 finance committee meetings, 3, we just have to really figure this out by the end of the fiscal year. And I'll really encourage us to relax on that exact date where there's some work to do. We're prepared to do the work.
Yeah. So, we're reinvesting in our community. And this is what we're talking about, is making certain that we stay at a quality and a level that we need to stay at. I don't look at the fiscal year 26 items as a takeoff, because they're in motion. They've been budgeted out. If they come in over budget, that's another discussion. But of the 78 projects that are on schedule, at what time do they come off, right? Because that's the conversation we also haven't had, is that, okay, these have been in the works for X number of years, X number of time. They'll be out of the system here, okay, which frees up other areas to address. Fire and rescue and this building really has come up recently. Fire and rescue's been discussed for a while, but this building really, because of the issues we've had over the past, several months. And it's not fair to the staff to work in this kind of an atmosphere. So, we've got to realize that what we're talking about is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years. That's how this 5-year CIP came around. It's not 1 year. It is over a period of time with 78 different items. Currently, add 3 today, 4 today, whatever the number takes a number up, but which is a tremendous amount. And I said in the beginning, are we coming in too hungry, and are we coming in hungry because we fasted too long? And are we playing catch up? So, yes, we have a lot of funds in place, and we have a lot of funds in place because we haven't, as a community, done what's needed to be done. Costs also have risen. So looking at it holistically and going, this is the best way to get there. Using the tools that are in front of us, borrowing. Again, Mr. Alfred, he did a great job of saying exactly what I feel and think as well. So I just want us to keep in mind that it's a 5-year, right? It's and every year it's going to go out another year, so things will be moved. And 78's a lot, sounds like a tremendous amount, and it's worrisome. I'll admit that, but I know y'all will deal with it. But also, I don't want us to push something forward that staff can't handle. So I rely upon y'all as well. In closing, thank you. Great information. I think you've got some good direction. Thank you for all your comments and time today. We're adjourned.